Welcome to Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast with Alexia Leachman, the weekly 9-month podcast to help parents-to-be look forward to their fear-free childbirth. Alexia is a pregnancy and head trash clearance coach and the author of Fear-Free Childbirth, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy and a Positive, Pain-Free Birth. As a mum who's had 2 fear-free and pain-free births, Alexia wants to share with you how she overcame her pregnancy and childbirth fears so that you can look forward to having a fear-free birth too. Over the 9-month life of this podcast, Alexia will be sharing some real-life stories from mums and dads, insights into the latest childbirth research, inspiring tales from birth professionals, and some tips and techniques for clearing your fears and stresses. If you would like to receive a free chapter from her book, then head over to fearfreechildbirth.com, where you can also sign up for her email series, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy. But now, it's time for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, today is the day for another positive birth story on the podcast. As you know, I'm really keen to help spread a positive message around childbirth. And for me, a really big part of that is listening to some positive birth stories. And quite frankly, there just aren't enough of those out there. There is no shortage of all the negative stuff, the traumatic stuff, the difficult stuff, the scary stuff. But you're not going to hear that here. What I've got for you today is a beautiful natural birth story that is a home birth as well. And today's mum, when she first found out she was pregnant, she decided that she was going to have an elective cesarean because she couldn't face the idea of giving birth. And yet she ended up having a natural home birth. What I've got for you today is Melissa's beautiful natural home birth story. Now, Melissa, when she first found out that she was pregnant, she was going to have an elected cesarean because she was just too scared of the idea of giving birth and couldn't quite face it. And yet she managed to turn herself around and succeed in having a beautiful natural home birth. So during our chat, you're going to find out exactly how she managed to do a complete turnaround in her thinking and give herself the confidence and get rid of that fear so that she could, really approach her childbirth with excitement, but also free of fear and have that natural home birth. But before I dive into that, I just want to share something with you before we start. Now, are you somebody that watches One Born Every Minute? Or maybe you're somebody that doesn't watch One Born Every Minute. I certainly avoided it like the plague when I was pregnant. And to be honest, I haven't really watched it at all because I just do not want to fill my life with that kind of negativity. But unfortunately, many women do. And the unfortunate side effect of that is that many women, as a result of watching things like One Born Every Minute, and I'm not just pointing the finger at that show, but there's lots of TV shows out there that dramatise childbirth unnecessarily. And unfortunately, in doing so, they're actually ending up being a huge form of childbirth education for women. Because let's face it, when we find out that we're pregnant, we don't really know a hell of a lot about childbirth. In fact, I know when I found out I was pregnant, I knew zip all about childbirth. And I, like the mum's story that I'm going to share with you today, was going to go for drugs and everything. I'm not sure I was going to go for cesarean, but certainly I was up for taking every drug going to help to get rid of the pain because I thought that childbirth was painful, that it was going to be nasty, that I couldn't cope, that it was going to be scary. And I got that impression because of the stuff that I see on TV and in the films. And that is just not right. So many women are getting educated on childbirth through those means. And yet the TV people are just not taking responsibility and they continue to put out all this negative stuff. And so I thought, you know what, we need to maybe try and put some pressure on for the TV guys to portray a more balanced view of childbirth. And so part of what I'm doing with this podcast is trying to add to the positive narrative around childbirth. But this is just me with my little microphone in my own home office with kids running around in the background. I do not have the reach that TV shows have and that TV channels have. And so they really need to take responsibility. So I've decided to start a petition that you can currently find on change.org to petition Channel 4 that here in the UK are the guys that put out One Born Every Minute. And I know that they're currently in discussion with a TV production company about a childbirth documentary. And the TV production company pitched them a whole series on childbirth. They wanted to portray a positive, balanced view of childbirth, and yet Channel 4 only took one show off them. So why is that when they put series after series after series of One Born Every Minute that really does put the fear of God into women when it comes to childbirth, and yet they only want to put out one show that puts out a more balanced view? This just isn't right. So I thought, rather than just sort of spitting my toast out here on my own, in Nottingham in the UK, why not try and make a difference and do something about it? So I thought, hey, I'm going to start a petition, and that's what I've done. So if you agree with my view that we should have a more balanced view of childbirth so that women have got a positive source of information that's going to be giving them something good, something that's really going to help them in their childbirth choices so they can make the decisions and choices from an informed point of view, then please add your support to the petition. You can find out more about this at fearfreechildbirth.com/petition if you want the link to the petition right there, and also a little bit more about why I've chosen to do this. But I'm not going to go on more about that today because I want to get back to the positive birth story that my mum of today, Melissa, is going to be sharing with me, and it really is a wonderful story. I first heard this story at my local home birth group because Melissa and I both are part of the same home birth group here in our hometown, which is Nottingham in the UK. But the first time I heard her story, it was told by her husband, Tim, and he did such a brilliant job telling the story, and it really is a lovely story. When I heard it, I remember thinking, I'd love to speak to them because I'd love to feature this story in my book, because I wasn't doing the podcast then. But now I'm doing the podcast, it's even better because you can actually hear Melissa sharing her story herself, and it's much better to hear somebody sharing their story than reading the words on a page. So here is Melissa's beautiful natural home birth story. Right, today on the podcast, I've got Melissa Smith who's joining me, who's going to share with us her birth story. And it's a wonderful story because I did hear it at our local birthing group and I can't wait to hear it again. But last time I heard it, it was her other half that shared it. So welcome to the podcast, Melissa.
Hi, thank you.
Now, before we start and you share us your birth story, would you mind just sort of telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I live in Nottingham with my husband, Tim. We've got one daughter, Orla, who is currently 5 months, and I run an acting school for young people in Leicester called Urban Young Actors, and I'm involved in various creative endeavours.
Lovely, lovely. So now I remember hearing your lovely story, but I really want to try and sort of take your mind back to the beginning of your pregnancy. And can you remember what it was like when you first found out that you were pregnant?
Yeah, it was really, really surreal. And I kind of think, when you're trying for a baby, you kind of always think, what's that moment going to be like? And it's just completely different to how you imagine, and a lot scarier. Once it's sort of, you see the line, it's like, oh my gosh, this is it, that my life is about to change. And I remember sort of thinking, is this true? Is this line real? And so I got Tim to check it, and he was like, I think it's there, but it was so faint. So we had a mad dash to a 24-hour supermarket. I got every brand I could find, and yeah, sure enough, they were all saying pregnant. And so then it was like the realisation and feeling really excited, but also really petrified at the same time.
So what were you petrified about? Was it sort of just the overall experience of it, or was there something specific that was kind of worrying you or you were scared of?
Yeah, I think the whole thing, you kind of know it will change your life, not in the way that you realise when you do have a baby, but I think also the birth as well, because I'd always been quite fearful of birth. And I remember having conversations with my friends, just maybe a few years before that, saying that if I did ever have a baby, I would 100% want an elective cesarean, So that was my mindset then, just because of just being quite fearful actually of giving birth.
Wow. So, I mean, because your birth wasn't at all that, was it?
No.
We're not going to get there yet, but I know, I'm just like hearing you say that, I'm like, wow, that's like a real turnaround compared to where you started your pregnancy journey. So how did you, what was your first trimester like then? How were you starting to sort of integrate the idea of being pregnant and start to get used to it? How was that for you?
It was quite difficult. I mean, hormonally, I was kind of a bit all over the place, and I definitely didn't feel myself mentally or physically for that first trimester. And obviously, it's always a bit scary, and you think, is everything going to go okay? But I think I realised quite early on that in order to have a better pregnancy and birth, I needed to kind of do some work myself. I knew it wasn't just going to happen, and I had to kind of almost reset my mind and the way I viewed, giving birth and things like that. So that's when I started to explore and find, different avenues to go down, really. And that's when I kind of came across this idea of hypnobirthing, and someone had mentioned it to me, a couple of years beforehand, and said, I had a really positive birth with my second child because I used hypnobirthing, and it wasn't painful. And I just thought, well, that can't be true, but at the same time, I'll give it a go, because if it is, then great.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So when you first came across hypnobirthing, what did you do? Did you get a book? Did you do a course? How did you sort of get to know about it a little bit more?
I actively then sort of tried to find a course that I thought would be good for not just myself but my husband to go on, because obviously, for me, I really felt like the birth was a joint experience, and so we came across a mindful hypnobirthing course that you could bring a partner on, that Sophie Fletcher was running, and so we got sent the book to read before the class, which we did. So every night, we'd read a bit of the book before we went to sleep, and then by the time we got to the class, we had read the whole book together. And then we did the course, and that was a really massive turning point for us.
Yeah, well, I remember doing that. I did that same course as Sophie, that Mindful Mama course, and it was really during my first pregnancy, and it really is a brilliant one-day course, doesn't it? It really kind of shifts your thinking.
It really does.
Around. And what is it that you specifically liked? What was it that was there one thing that happened on that day that you saw, or what was the one thing that really kind of was the hub of that shifted your thinking?
I think just the way Sophie delivered it was just so brilliant, because it made you realise that a positive birth is a very real thing. And up until then, I kind of thought it was this mystical, thing that doesn't really happen to many people. But then when she was giving example after example of people she knew, and then she had a lady come and talk to us that had 2 home births, and it just kind of really solidified in my mind, this is what I want, and I actually feel so much more positive about this now, and just getting my mind into gear to be able to focus and just switch off all the negative and just focus more on the positive.
So were there still some negative thoughts floating around your head at this point?
Yeah, there was. I mean, it wasn't like I completely just felt 100% confident at that point, but it did, make a massive change. But it's just, I had little niggles, like my mum had retained 2 retained placentas before, so I kind of thought, would that happen to me? And, I had a couple of gynecological issues in the past, and so there was a few things that were still worrying me, but I did address those with Sophie, and she just said, none of these things will stop you from having a positive birth if you set your mind to it. And she ended up being right.
And so what other stuff were you doing to help you prepare? Was it just the hypnobirthing, or did you do any other kind of research or any other kind of mental preparation?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we did, we had the hypnobirthing CD, and we had the MP3s, and we basically would listen to that every single night without fail as we were going to sleep, and then whilst we were asleep, not the whole night, but, just for an hour or so. So I was just hoping it was sort of sinking into my subconscious, and also into Tim, so he could be, the best supportive partner on the day. And I just was surrounding myself with lots of women that had positive births, and spoke to midwives that encouraged it, and watched lots of positive birth DVDs and videos, and started to read lots of positive birth books as well. So in effect, I kind of immersed myself into positivity for then the whole of the pregnancy from once I'd done that course.
And so what books really worked for you during your pregnancy?
Sophie's book was definitely the most, important to me, especially having met her and been on the course. But I also really liked the Ina May Gaskin book as well. I think that was a really, really important book. And in fact, I was reading that book when I was having my contractions
really?
in my labour as well. So, yeah, I would say those. But there was lots of others that were just books of positive birth stories that I found to be really useful.
Now, for the listeners, the book that Melissa's just mentioned, Sophie Fletcher, is Sophie Fletcher that I had on the podcast much earlier on in the podcast. So if you want to listen to Sophie's interview about preparing for positive birth, then there is an episode where I speak to Sophie, who's the author of Mindful Hypnobirthing. So I just wanted to let people know that, Melissa.
Yeah.
Now, what about, were there any other, did you sort of research any aspects around birthing, you know, the more, not the sort of the more anatomical kind of, I don't know, the ins and outs of what's happening to the body and hormones and that kind of thing. Did you look into that as well? Definitely,
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't even completely aware of what actually happened during labour before, you know, I got pregnant. Obviously, you know, the basics. So I definitely looked into that, and I also tried to look into, you know, the different types of births, just because I knew in my mind I wanted to try and have this positive home birth, ideally, without too much pain relief. But obviously I know that things can change on the day, so I wanted to kind of look into all the options and just mentally prepare myself, because one thing Sophie taught us was that, you know, even if things don't go to plan, the most important thing is that you have a positive attitude and that you feel in control and that you feel like you're making your own decisions on the day and you're not just being kind of coerced into something that you're not actually comfortable with or you're not educated on. So that was really important to me.
So I guess you felt a bit like a birthing expert leading up to your
well,
birth.
I wouldn't say an expert, but I think I definitely surrounded myself with some experts, which helped.
So in the lead up to your birth then, what was your, did you have an ideal birth in mind in the lead up to your birth?
I think once I'd made that decision after the hypnobirthing course that I wanted to, you know, try and have a natural home birth, I still was a bit nervous, thinking, okay, but what if something goes wrong and I'm not in a hospital? And again, it was Sophie that suggested that we might consider having doula. So at that point, I had never even heard of a doula. I didn't know what a doula did at all. I just thought, well, I don't understand why you'd want one when you've, you know, got a partner with you. Obviously, I've completely changed my mind now, because I did have a doula, Wendy Coe, who was just amazing. And I think that, again, was a big turning point, because, you know, she'd come and visit us on quite a few occasions before the birth. And again, just being able to go through the birth plan and what I wanted from a birth, that was really important and helped things so much.
So how much in advance did you start working with the doula then before your birth?
I think, oh gosh, now you're asking me. I think it was probably maybe 3 months, I think, beforehand we met her. So, you know, wouldn't have loads of time with her, but it was enough to sort of solidify that relationship between the three of us, and for her to really understand my wishes and be my advocate on the day, so Tim could concentrate on just being there for me.
And what kind of things did you, I mean, it sounds like you discussed some of the more practical aspects of the birth, maybe the birthing plan, but were there any other things that she was supporting you with?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I was doing sort of pregnancy yoga and things, and she's a yoga practitioner, and so that's obviously a lot to do with the mind and how, you know, you want to approach your pregnancy and your birth. And so, yeah, I think just being mindful, really. Again, she helped with that, and it's I really believe it's mind over matter, you know, a lot more than anything else, really.
So now I really want to know about the birth. So how did it all begin for you? What was that point when you thought, hang on, this is it?
Well, it's really funny, because I was 2 days before I went into labour, I had a bit of a wobble, and I'd not had the best pregnancy and had been hospitalised a couple of times, had a false labour, and I got cold feet basically about having a home birth. So I said to my husband, you know, actually I think I might go to hospital because I feel a bit nervous now, and he was like, you know, whatever you want to do is fine, I'll support you, whatever. And then the next day something just switched, and I just had this instinct that I was going to go into labour within the next 24 hours. I couldn't tell you why, it was just there. So that whole day I just stayed at home and I just watched loads of positive birth videos and read loads of positive birth stories. And then, you know, he got back that night and he was like, oh, you seem a bit strange, you remind me of how you were in the first trimester. And I said, I'm having this baby tonight, well, you know, we're going to start labour tonight, I really have a feeling about that. And he's like, actually I think you're right. And then I said, I don't want to go to hospital, I want to stay at home. And then that was that. And at 1:30 in the morning, then, yeah, sure enough, I had my first contraction.
Wow, okay. So did your waters break, or did it begin with contractions for you then?
Yeah, well, my waters did break, but it was so slight that you know, I wasn't 100% convinced at first. But then, as soon as I started to have my contractions, that's when I realised, yeah, I'm definitely in labour now. But I just remember feeling incredibly calm, actually. And I think when I was younger, I'd think, oh, I so panic at that moment. I wasn't panicked at all. It just felt really natural, and I just said to Tim, just to let you know, I think I'm in labour. And he was like, okay. he went back to sleep for a couple of hours. And
best thing.
And I just sat reading, the positive birth stories and
Fab.
just felt really, really ready for it, actually.
So how long did that kind of go on for, that kind of moment of you just being still with it and allowing it to kind of unfold? How did it kind of unfold and starting cranking up a bit?
I think, it's a couple of hours of just me reading, feeling like it was all very manageable, and then it started to get a little bit more intense. So that's when we rang the doula and just said, it's happening, and just sort of want you to be aware. And so then it just got kind of more and more intense over the hours, and the whole labour was around 12 hours, but my second stage was actually only about half an hour, so that bit was really quick. Throughout the labour I just was quite focused, and just had my hypnobirthing MP3s on, and just really in that positive state of mind, and just really concentrating on my breathing, because that was really helping me to keep calm as well. I used a TENS machine. Again, I don't know how much that really helped in terms of physical, the intensity, but I think it just kind of gave me something to focus on with those contractions. And I spent a lot of the time sat on my bed just breathing and humming, and then I decided I wanted to lie on my bed, so I was lying on my side for a while, and then I was there for quite a couple of hours, I'd say, and then I decided to stand up, and that was the moment where it felt like the baby was slightly dropping, and that's when the intensity really, really cranked up, and then that's when we were kind of on the road to the end, really.
Wow. So when you said you were doing some humming, what kind of humming? What were you? Did that something just come from within you that you just felt like you needed to do, or was that something that you've done humming in the past, or I don't know, maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, occasionally we've got some Himalayan singing bowls, and so we try and meditate and hum along with those. So we definitely found that useful during the actual labour. But to be honest, it was really just an instinctive thing. It was I just felt happy making a sound with the contraction. For me, it just helped release that contraction a bit and just sort of ride that wave. But the doula was kind of on hand to really make sure that I wasn't straining too much, that it was a nice calm level. So it's just really quite instinctive.
Wow. So just thinking about timing, so you said about half when the contractions started, and that period of labour was about 12 hours. So you're saying that the little one was born about lunchtime?
She was, yeah. She actually, it was literally 1:28 and my contractions had started 1:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that final, that half hour of that final push, as it were, how was that for you then, when it really sort of, cranked up a level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that, it was the most intense part of the whole process. And, I would never say, it's painful, because to me I associate pain when you're injured, something's not right. This felt 100% right. It felt the most natural thing in the world, but it was very, very intense at that last stage, but it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. And I just remember feeling like we're near the end now, I can do this last bit, and just feeling really excited, thinking I was just about to meet my little girl.
So did you know that you were having a girl? Or
I did.
You did. So you knew you were going to be welcoming a little girl any minute now. That's fabulous. So what were you standing when you delivered? What was going on? No,
actually, well, we'd planned to have a water birth, and that was all set up in the lounge, ready. Everything was good to go. But the midwife that came, she brought a trainee midwife with her, and because there wasn't two midwives there, and one was only a trainee, they wouldn't let me get into the pool. So I was just staring at it and just longing to get in it, and I never actually made it into the pool, because by the time the second midwife arrived, the baby had been born. But so what happened was, in the end, I was lying on my side on my sofa, and that was where she decided to come out. And it's really funny, because I really thought before I went into labour that I thought when I'm in labour, I'm sure I'll be stood, or sort of crouching down. None of that felt natural to me on the day. The most natural, comfortable position was on my side. side, on my left side.
Wow. Okay. So you're on the left side, and then she came out. And then how was when that moment when she came out? How would just tell us a little bit about that? Was your husband there to catch her, or how did
Yeah, it was so incredible, and it's actually kind of, I feel a bit emotional thinking about it now. But yeah, he as the baby was coming out, Tim had said he wanted to be the first person to touch her. So he sort of touched her head and said, she's on the way. and that was kind of really positive for me to know, thinking, okay, we're really on near the end now.
Yeah.
And then Tim helped the midwives then to pass Orla to me, and so I just had her on my chest, and it was just incredibly overwhelming, just feeling completely in love and completely exhausted, completely excited, and just I can't exactly remember the words I said. I mean, Tim said it was something along the lines of, oh, hello, you're so gorgeous, and just cuddling. I had sort of tears in my eyes, but I will always remember the feeling, and I can't really describe it, but just feeling like, yes, we've done this, we've worked together as a team, like, baby and I, and now here she is, safe and sound, and she had one eye stuck down. I hope there's an eyeball in there in the walls. And yeah, it was just lovely. And I just remember having lots of hair, which surprised me. I don't know why.
Oh, it's lovely. I'm getting tears just hearing that story. It's just so overwhelming, isn't it? Just the lovely stories of births like that. And so when she was born, then what did you breastfeed straight away? Did she breast crawl? Like what did you look in her eyes, or how did all that stuff?
I put her straight onto my chest, and I offered her my breast, but she didn't want it. So I was like, okay, that's fine, but I would just have skin to skin with her anyway. I think she was tired. And it was really lovely. And I kept the cord attached until it stopped pulsating. So that was lovely as well, just having her there, and for about an hour, just skin on skin. It was really, really special. And then once it had stopped pulsating, then Tim cut the cord, which again is something he wanted to do, and that was really lovely that he got to do that. And then she was passed on to Dad, and had an outfit put on, because unfortunately we had to transfer because I did have a retained placenta.
Oh, no.
So we tried everything to get it out, because I was hoping for a natural delivery of that, and I'd sort of initially refused the injection, that encourages it to kind of get out quicker. And in the end, I was just losing too much blood. So they said, sorry, but we're going to have to transfer you now. But the thing is, it was obviously that was a bit inconvenient, and I didn't really want to go to hospital. Having said that, it's such a small part of the whole birth experience. And the main thing I always wanted was, to have the baby in the most natural way possible. And I managed to achieve that. So I was really happy with that.
So when you look back at your birth now, it sounds to me like you just think of it as just this wonderfully positive experience. Is that how you feel about that?
Oh God, yeah. It was incredible. It was so much more than I ever thought it would have been, and I think it's really indescribable, and the love you feel in that moment, and not just for your baby but also for your partner. You really feel like you've accomplished something as a team, and I loved it. I really feel like I had such a positive birth. And
you mentioned team, and just earlier on you mentioned about how you and baby worked as a team. And I'm really interested that you said that, because I really feel that, I feel like in the lead up to my birth, I was kind of almost like coaching my baby. So it's going to go like this is how it's going to go. The labour's going to go this long. You're going to be born in less than this time. This is how it's going to roll, honey. And she was very well behaved, and she did as she was told. But we worked as a team, and I'm just curious, when you say that you worked as a team, did you kind of talk to your baby while she was inside or during labour, like to try and bring on that kind of team spirit?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I remember going to a pregnancy yoga class, and the yoga practitioner just sort of played this sort of Buddhist type song, and it was just so overwhelming. At that moment, I was just lying there, and she sort of encouraged you to touch the bump, and I really felt the strongest connection at that point, and that was when something clicked for me. It wasn't, this sort of bunch of cells. Now it developed. My baby was there, and we had a connection. At that point, I really felt something, and then I would often talk to the baby and sing to the baby or play the baby songs. And we definitely connected. And I think for me personally, knowing that I was having a girl helped, because I was fully prepared for what was, about to arrive into my world. And I felt like we already had a mum-daughter bond even before she was here.
No, that sounds lovely. And I'm just thinking, when you think about, you mentioned how positive it all felt, especially for you as a family unit, thinking about wanting to do birth again or pregnancy again, is this something that you're open to do again?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't particularly enjoy a lot of my pregnancy for various reasons.
Yes,
lots of side effects and everything else. But having said that, it certainly wouldn't make me think never again. And in terms of the birth, I'd do that again tomorrow.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
No, I totally get the whole pregnancy. I a bit meh with that. You can take that one away, but the birth, I'd do that tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, well, no, this just sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, Melissa. Is there, if there's a new mum or mum to be listening to this, is there anything that you'd like to maybe, any sort of final things that you'd maybe like to say to try and help them to prepare for fear-free birth?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that surprises me when I speak to a lot of women is that they don't really prepare for. They kind of just say, oh, well, we'll just sort of see what happens on the day. And for me, I just think the reason that I did end up having such a good positive birth was, I think, because of the amount of preparation I did beforehand. And you're just looking into different things and different practices, different techniques, meeting different people. And to me, I just thought, this is the biggest event of my life. I spent many, many hours preparing for my wedding. Why would I not do the same for the birth of my child? Or like when you've got a big work project, you put hours and hours into that. So again, why would you not when it comes to having your baby? So it made the most sense for me to just work really hard and read up and watch loads of stuff. And I think if you're a mum to be, I would really advise you to do that if you can, because the more informed you are about all the aspects of it, the better. And then the more prepared you feel on the day, so you don't feel panicked and you don't think, oh gosh, what's going to happen? I'm just going to have to go with it. You're going to have a very clear mind of what you want, and you do have backup plans should things, go wrong or if things have to change. But that's fine, because you've accepted that and you know what you want from your birth.
No, that sounds. I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. It really is about. I think a lot of the fears that women have are down to just being underinformed or misinformed about what it's actually like. And if you just educate yourself about it, then a lot of those fears just kind of fall by the wayside, don't they?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think just being able to be a bit mindful and just really work on your breathing beforehand, I think that for me really, really helped, because I'm one of those people that I find it really hard to switch off normally in everyday life. And but when it came to the birth, I was able to. But again, I think a big part of that was the preparation.
And so think about all the preparation that you did during your pregnancy. Are you still sort of using a lot of that preparation now in your life?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably more than I actually realise. But it's the whole process has changed me as a person, and I don't just mean by being a mother, but I mean just experiencing the whole community that I've kind of become a part of, and how that affects you as a woman as well, and how it can also affect your relationships in a really, really positive way.
No, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Well, Melissa, it's been an absolute delight having you on the podcast. I'm really thank you so much for coming on and giving up your time to share your story and inspiring other women. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Melissa's positive birth story. I have got a lot more positive stories to come here on the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. They're just waiting in the bank, waiting to be published. And I've also got some positive written stories on the blog as well. And if you know anybody who would like to share their positive story, maybe that's you, you've got a previous positive birth story that you'd like to share, then please do get in touch. I'd happily accept videos that we can publish on the blog posts, and also guests on the podcast. So listen up for future positive birth stories here on the Fear Free Childbirth podcast, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman from the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really love it if you left a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or shared it with a friend. And don't forget, to get a free chapter from her book, head over to fearfreechildbirth.com to get your copy, as well as finding other episodes in this podcast and more about how Alexia can help you with pregnancy and birth preparation coaching. Until next time.